Hello, friendos! Welcome back to another exciting episode of Frosty Talks. I know it's been a while since I've done one of these, but I don't want to do too many of these and let you all get, I guess, burn out on them. I know you guys love them, but there's been quite a few things that happened in my life. Constant schedule changes at work cause a lot of issues, so sometimes I can only do gameplay stuff. Sometimes I can do these Frosty Talks, but I'll try to do more of these as I can, but don't expect these weekly. You can expect them as often as I can make them, I guess, is how I really want to phrase that. But anyway, so today on the docket, we've got a little bit of Funimation news. Well, not really news, but we'll get to that here in a second. I'm going to try and do a comic book review. Well, not really a single book, but it's going to be a series of books. So I'll give that away later. And some stuff with Vic. So that's always exciting. But without further ado, let's get into it. So, the stuff with Funimation. Oh boy. If Funimation has their license to Dragon Ball Z after all that's happened this week, I would be very surprised. For those of you who don't know, or for those of you who are huge fans of Dragon Ball Z, and don't want the innocence of the show ruined, as much innocence as that show can have. I'm going to put a timestamp down below to the time that you all need to jump to in order to, I guess, avoid ruining the innocence of your favorite characters. Because, wow. But I'll give you 5 seconds to jump forward before we get into this story. So, if you're still here, welcome to Ruining Your Childhood with your friend Frosty here. Your friendo Frosty. Yeah, there we go. So, there have been a couple of warm-ups or bloopers to come out here recently, and they kind of ruin Dragon Ball Z, or really just all of the Dragon Ball properties. So I guess what you're wondering is, what were these recordings? Well, trying to think of how to word these, because with YouTube right now, they're cracking down on pretty much anything that's derogatory. So a lot of stuff is being silenced, which isn't the right way to go about things. But to give you the basic gist of things, so earlier, I guess by the time this airs, it'll be Sunday. So earlier last week, Nick Rekieta over Rekieta Law, Law-splaining the interwebs, decided he was going to basically release these recordings of different voice actors during either their warm-ups or some bloopers. Not really specified, I guess. And these recordings are not good. Like, they don't look good, they don't sound good. And for some reason, the weird thing about all of this is that Funimation had these for years. And while I'm not all for bringing up things that people did in the past to basically ruin careers. This one, it has to roll that way. It has to roll that way for several reasons. Number one is that a lot of these recordings are done with Funimation equipment on Funimation property with Funimation's licenses. And, well, these licenses are pretty much these licenses are from Toei. And Toei is very selective with what they do with their properties, or I'm pretty sure they're going to be very selective, because Japan is a very, very conservative nation, and they don't really take kindly to unprofessional behavior. So, what was said? Well, I can't repeat any of it. Basically, what I can tell you is Sean Schemmel, the voice actor for Goku, called his son a homophobic, flomic. Wow. Goku basically called his son a homophobic slur. Not just once, several times in that first recording that we heard. The second recording we heard was Chi-Chi making very sexual noises and screaming Gohan's name. For those of you who don't know who Gohan is, it's her son. I'll let you guys put two and two together there. The third clip was I think a three-parter. It's basically Hercule, or you know what his other name is. If you do anything outside of watch the English dub. And the announcer guy talking about his member. So that's fun. But then we get to the fourth clip. Well, I think actually the third clip is Krillin talking down to his wife. But I mean, it's not that bad. Like it's basically saying that she's a very high maintenance woman, and he doesn't say that very nicely. But I mean, if I ever met a married man who talked nicely about his wife, who talked nicely about his wife when he's bitching about him, then, you know, it would be a strange marriage, because everybody's got gripes about everybody. It's not specifically guys. So then we get to the final clip. Well, this final clip is a doozy. So Chris Sabat does the voice of, let me make sure I've got this correctly, of Piccolo, Kami, Yamcha, Guru, Mr. Popo, and I guess Korin? I don't know, Korin's somewhere in there. Korin may not be him. But, so, they're all on the lookout, and they need some sacred ointment to do some very inappropriate things to each other. It basically becomes a very lewd scene. And, of course, yeah, at first, Yamcha is resistant. So that comes with another tag that a lot of people don't really like. Starts with an R and ends with an E. So yeah, that wasn't good at all, and it was a 5-minute clip. And if that doesn't make matters worse, if it was just a blooper, it would be strictly vocal. There would be no sound effects. There would be no music. There would be little to no production to it, right? Well, in this audio clip, you had sound effects, you had music, you had production to it. So it becomes less of a blooper or a vocal warm-up and more of a skit. Now, all the other ones I can attest to being straight vocal, which could be a blooper, could be a warm-up. It could just be people trying to stay in character. But for the most part, these should not have stayed on Funimation servers. Oh, there was another clip in there of of Colleen Klinkenbeard and Monica Rial, and they said some really questionable things, but it wasn't in character, so it's, I guess, a little bit better. It's not that great. None of this looks good for Funimation, and the reason why it doesn't look good for Funimation is because if you remember from another Frosty Talks, they fired Vic Mignogna for making a crass joke. I wouldn't even say it was a lewd joke. It was just a crass joke. Basically, just for reference, Monica Rial signed a jelly bean and threw it at Vic, and Vic ate it, and he said, "Now I can say I ate Monica Rial." Not a big deal. It's almost like a terrible dad. It is a terrible dad joke. So that is what he supposedly got fired for, and because that was on, that was dealing with a Funimation property or something like that. It's really weird. But well, it was investigated. I can't say if he was specifically fired for that, but it was definitely weird, to say the least. So we've got that. We've got all these recordings, and they've been on Funimation servers for years. And the reason why I say this needs to actually burn some people down is because the stuff with Vic, allegedly, it allegedly happened 12 years ago. These recordings, we don't know when they came about, or when they were recorded, when they were recorded. But what we can say is that they were kept on Funimation servers due to either neglect or being able to hold them over. And it's just not, it's not good. Stuff like that, especially if you're not going to use it, should be deleted. I mean, yeah, it's bad that they said that, but I mean, if you're going to keep those on your server, then you're just asking for a leak. And, not really reining in these actors. Ah, God. There is a hair somewhere, and it is annoying the shit out of me. If you're not going to keep them, then they should be deleted. Because having the... And, the directors and management should be reining in these actors, like saying, "Hey, you can't say that. This is your warning. You do it again, you're going to be fired." That's how it should work. Or you get a warning, you'll get a written statement, there shouldn't be a second written statement. You know, something like that. But again, they are contractors. Even though Sabat is basically a director out there. And even worse is he's part of Okatron 5000 or something like that. Which is a competitor to Funimation, which should not have recording studio for Funimation. They shouldn't be doing recordings for Funimation. Funimation should be doing the recording because they hold the license. So there's a lot of really weird stuff going on out there. So what I'm saying here is, had they not burnt down Vic, I would say this is just this sucks, but oh well. Let's move on. But because they're not just burning down Vic, they're going after Vic's fans, calling them, what was it that Sabat called us? Oh yeah, he called us autistic. He called us autistic, and that is really bad. You should not be doing that stuff. Like, I don't care if you don't like Vic. I don't care if you don't agree with some of the choices he's made. You don't call fans that are potentially your fans. I have pictures with Sabbath. I have pictures with Schimmel. Schimmel was not a very, very memorable interaction, by the way, guys. But I have pictures with Sabbath and Schimmel, and I'm a Vic fan. And not only am I a Vic fan, but Vic, to me, is more trustworthy than Sabbath, to say the least. Simply because of what Sabbath's been doing. Like, he'll look you in the face and give you a smile and shake your hand, but behind your back, all you are is another number. It kind of seems like. And that to me is sad. Whereas Schimmel was soliciting girls right there in the line, before and after us. I say us because my best friend was with me, and he can attest to this. So, and they burned Vic down for what? A jelly bean joke? For soliciting two 22-year-olds for sex? Unsuccessfully, we might add. For consensually kissing somebody that worked at Funimation. Those are what he was investigated for. And yet we have these recordings of these actors doing very inappropriate things in character. I just want that to let that sink in. So, on to the comic book review. I don't have them within arm's reach. That's terrible of me. But so the comic book that I'm going to review today is the Shattered Grid storyline from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I know I've been talking about Power Rangers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Batman and stuff like that. I know you're wondering, when are you going to get to the games? Well, I'll also do a quick news story pertaining to Astral Chain here in a second. But Shattered Grid. So there's two different stories that happen with Shattered Grid, and they're all because of Shattered Grid, okay? So in the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comic book, Shattered Grid starts off with alternate timeline Tommy stays with Rita instead of giving, instead of accepting the extended hand of the Rangers, and together with some of her best monsters and Goldar, he ends up gaining the upper hand on the Rangers. And in a desperate move, the Rangers decide to give Jason the White Ranger powers. But as he's getting the White Ranger powers, Tommy, who is known in that timeline as Lord Draken, enters the command center, kills Jason, and is fused with the White Ranger powers. So now he has the Green Ranger powers and the White Ranger powers, and somehow they form the Black Dragon. But anyway, I digress. So he gains the upper hand with the Rangers and takes over the world, and basically has an army of Ranger sentries, like Mastodon sentries, I think, are like scouts or whatever, and then Tyranno soldiers are like his royal guard. It's really weird. Like, I don't know how he was able to multiply the powers, but that's what happened. And so during all this, he ends up not only killing Rita, but also killing Zordon in this alternate timeline. And eventually he gets thwarted and sent back to the Mighty Morphin timeline. He breaks out and regains his powers, kidnaps Ninjor, and is going from timeline to timeline, gathering morphers from different Ranger eras so that he can become one with the grid. And because of this shift in the timeline becomes fractured and basically shatters, which is why they call it Shattered Grid. So, just wanted to give you that brief synopsis of the story. You'll have to read it for yourself because it's a fantastic read. It's written by Kyle Higgins. It was the last Power Rangers comic that he was a part of. It was the last Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comics he was a part of. And if you've ever read any of his writing, it's fantastic. I highly recommend going and reading it. I'll give it a would recommend on my scale. On my scale, it's well, I'll give it a highly recommend. Let's call it that, because on my scale, it's highly recommend, read it, don't recommend, stay away. So I give it a highly recommend. And the reason for that is because the writing is so good, and a bunch of the little storylines that are kind of intertwined in that are fantastic. One of those storylines that is kind of intertwined is the Ranger Slayer. She goes back a little bit too far in the timeline because she's looking for Lord Draken, and ends up in the Go-Go Power Rangers timeline and or time frame. So she ends up in that, and she fights the Rangers and nearly defeats them. The only thing that stops her is Kimberly's boyfriend, because in her timeline, the Shattered Grid timeline, or the alternate future, Matthew dies. And because that's one person that she held very dear to her, it I guess for a split second snapped her out of the manipulation of Lord Draken. But eventually they break the spell, and some things happen. that's another highly recommend on the reading, because there's little things that just tear you down. Because the way I see it is, if you have one really bad event, you must also have a really good event. Like, because they killed Matthew, and because she comes from that dark timeline where Matthew is dead, when she goes back in time and she sees some of her comrades after snapping out of the mind control, there's some very touching moments, and I would like to show you, but I don't want to give it away. It's one of the it really warmed my heart when I saw it. If you've read it, or if you're going to read it, the line is "Bring it in, Magellan." So that, if you've read it, that should give you enough hint as to what I thought was like one of the best moments. I really enjoyed that. It really brought home, these characters, because I grew up with Tommy, Kimberly, Jason, Trini, Zach, Billy, and they're all very near and dear to my heart. So seeing them in like a very dire situation, and or some of them being warped beyond recognition, and then snapping out of it and having certain things happen to really kind of bring it back to, hey, they're still human. They're still, I guess, teenagers. I don't know. I think by the Ranger Slayer, I think she's like 20 or 30. I can't really say for sure, because it doesn't really say much about how that was, but that it was really well written, and I'm very glad that they went the way they did, and they fix the whole time hop stuff by just read it, and I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy. So, now onto the Vic stuff. So, when last we left, Vic is still in the same position he's in, but they just answered the TCPAs, which yesterday was the last day, and I think they got it in time. If not, then I think they got it in on time. So there you go. But in their response to the TCPAs, they have a couple of affidavits. One of them is from Chuck Hubert. Chuck Hubert is a voice actor who has worked with Funimation for quite some time, and he had some choice things to say. To basically sum it up, if you tick off a certain group of voice actors, you can almost guarantee that you're never going to work with that studio. Now, what Vic did to tick these guys off is probably not adhering to some of the things that they like to adhere to. Then we got some insights that there may be a casting couch, which, if you don't know what that is, I think there's like a definition of that. I'm going to Google it real quick and see. Here we go. Yeah, basically they have a casting couch, and from what he says, and with all that we've heard with the voice actors and stuff like that, it doesn't really surprise me that they have this. And even though they have this, it really doesn't highlight how bad this whole situation is for these people. Like I hinted earlier that Okatron 5000 or whatever the name is basically a competitor to Funimation who is doing all of their casting decisions, which is very strange. And I don't know if that's a part of Funimation's contract with Toei Animation, but that doesn't sound right to me. It doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like it's part of a contract. All right. So basically what a casting couch is that women perform acts for parts. I don't think I really need to go into more detail, but the casting couches usually end up in a Weinstein situation. Let's just put it that way. That's what a casting couch is. It's a Weinstein situation. So, not only do we have Okatron 5000 and these casting couches, but when Chuck Hubert went to the, I want to say, owner or co-owner of Funimation to talk about the actions of Chris Sabat, the owner basically told him, I don't believe you because Sabat is my friend. So, what that tells me is that corruption runs deep. Corruption runs deep, and there's a very unprofessional manner going on at Funimation. Now, the reason why I even think about saying anything about this is because, number one, when you burn a man down for a sexual joke, a soliciting sex from consenting adults, or it doesn't become anything other than him saying, sex? Yeah? That's a funny way of doing that. But when it doesn't become more than that, then there's no reason to burn this man down. And then, of course, we've got, hey baby, you wanna exchange saliva? And she's like, yeah, sure. Then what's the problem? I mean, even if it is in Funimation offices, oh well, it was consensual. I don't think it was in front of everybody. But anyway, I digress. So when you've investigated somebody for that shit, and you let them go, and you say, and you basically insinuate that it was because of this investigation or because of the allegations, you better have some damn good proof. And if you don't have damn good proof, then you better start implementing that idea to every single person in your company. Because if you don't, then you deserve what's coming. You really do. And on top of that, we also had some legal filings come out that Ronald Toye, one of the defendants, one of the defendants of this litigation has a history of domestic abuse. So that's fun. He didn't abuse just one wife. Nope, there's two. So that came out, and unfortunately, a lot of KickVic, or not a lot of KickVic, a lot of I Stand With Vic were like, oh, if that's true, then we forgive Monica. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say you don't get a pass. You don't get a pass. It's unfortunate if that stuff is going on, which she denies, so I'm just going to assume it's not. But you don't get a pass at all. There's no excuse to say, this man sexually assaulted me and take his career away. If you do that, there's no excuse for you. But because Ron is that way, and he's advocating for victims, I don't feel sympathy for this guy. And there was always this air of arrogance in his interview, in his deposition, that he exuded assholey. Well, I say he exuded assholey. What I mean is, he's an ass. If I were to peg somebody as something, if I were to throw darts at a dartboard and it had his face on the dart, I could throw it 5 miles away. It would still hit asshole. That is how much of an asshole he is. But again, why am I saying all this? Because we're seeing a pattern here. We see with Stan Dolan's affidavit that none of that happened. With Vic's, or not affidavit. We see with Stan Dolan's affidavit that none of that happened. We see with Vic's affidavit, he says none of that happened. We see Chuck Hubert's affidavit. We see the kind of environment that Funimation has. We see with previous litigations against Ron how he is, and we're starting to see patterns of these voice actors that are shady. But the only thing that remains constant is that they all dislike Vic because of his religion, because of who he voted for, or who he votes for, and because apparently he's a perfectionist. Because in one of the I'm not sure if it was an affidavit that stated this, but apparently what Vic likes to do is, if a director says that's it and that's what he wanted, Vic will say, I could do it better. Which, if I was the director and my actor said, I think we can do it better, I'd be like, by all means, try. By all means, go ahead and record it some more and see if I like that one better. Because to be honest with you, my creative decision may not be the best decision. Like, I'm willing to set aside my pride if you are able to produce something better than what I thought was the best. And if you don't, then we'll just throw out those sessions and use the one that I liked. I mean, that is ultimately what happens there. And I mean, if he was in the room saying, "No, that wasn't good enough, put in this other one," then that would be more of a kind of a douchebag move. Or Or if he's like, well, I don't believe you, I'm just going to do my own thing, and does it for 3 or 4 takes, that's a prima donna move. Like, I know best, you don't. But saying, I could do it better, go ahead. I want you to prove me wrong. And that's the way directors should be. It should be, this is the way I want it done. Do it. And if they're like, well, can we try that again? I want to see if I can do it better. If you are always saying that, then to me, you're my star employee. You know? I mean, if you're coming up to me and saying, yeah, what I did was good, but I think I can do it better. Like, if I was in a production, if I was in a factory producing something, and you are a machine operator, and I said, this material is good, and you say, well, I think I can make it better. I'm going to say, you've got 3 tries, go ahead. And if by the 3rd try it's not better, then we go back to the original. And that's how I was taught as a machine operator. If you think you can get this machine to run better, try it. If it doesn't run, if it runs worse, you got 3 chances to, or you don't really have 3 chances. Put it back to the way it was. So that's something that I noticed with that. But then we got Chris Slatosh. So Chris Slatosh is the owner of KickVic. So this guy could prove tortious interference with a contract and tortious interference with a business transaction, right? So Vic was slated to come to KickVic at the beginning of the year. Then all these allegations came out, and Ron started contacting KickVic. Well, with that, they were saying, hey, there's criminal charges coming. You need to get rid of him. Hey, he's a pedo. You need to get rid of him. Hey, there's charges coming. He's a pedo. Get rid of him. And they kept on and kept on. And finally, he was like, look, I can't get rid of Vic because we're in a contract. It would be a breach of contract and would be worse for me financially. So then they said, well, if you're not going to get rid of him, then Monica is not going to show up. These other voice actors aren't going to show up. And I'm going to be pulling the sponsorship for him. This is all Ron, by the way. That is tortious interference. I'm not a lawyer, but if I've signed a contract to show up at a convention, and that convention's like, yeah, we're not going to have you, but I've already booked the flight. Yeah, we're not going to have you, but I've already rented the hotel room. Yeah, but we're not going to have you. Are you going to reimburse me for this? That would be my first question. Well, if you're not going to have me, are you going to reimburse me? If they said no, then I'd be like, all right, I'll see you in court for breach of contract, right? So we could have potentially have seen a breach of contract lawsuit from Vic, but instead we're seeing tortious interference because the KickVic decided to actually go ahead and do it. But there are some other conventions that dropped him that I'm pretty sure he had a contract with. And at these conventions, the people had fun. The people who wanted to come and see Vic had fun. So it's not that these conventions lost money. It's that the voice actors wanted to, and Sabat was in on this as well. He was in on it the whole time. So it's not the fans that didn't want it. It was the voice actors that didn't want it. So if it was the voice actors that didn't want it, and Ron was the one contacting Chris Slatosh, who ran the convention, and Monica dropped her appearance, and Chris Sabat publicly dropped his appearance, but was still going to go. That sounds an awful lot like there might have been a conspiracy. I'm just a man with a microphone and a camera, but I can tell you this much. With all that we've seen so far, with Vic, with Monica, with Sabat, Schimmel, with Jamie, and all the other voice actors, so far, what we've seen is that Vic was torn down because a group of people decided that his religion was bad. A group of people decided that, well, because we don't like him, we're going to try and burn his life down. Well, let me tell you something. If you advocate for something, you better damn well be ready to have that advocated for you. Because at the end of the day, if I decided, hey, I'm going to burn down somebody's life because I don't like them, well, if it turns out that I'm lying, if it turns out that I've been doing things that are just as bad, but you actually have proof that I've done these bad things, then I should be ready for that to happen to me. You reap what you sow. This is something that's been true time and time again. When you plant the seed, you must also be able to reap it. Or, if you planted the seed and the seed doesn't grow, who's to blame? Who's to blame for that seed not growing? It's not me. Moral of the story, kids, and adults alike. Life is just a boomerang. Eventually it'll all come back to you. So, what I want to highlight here is that this day and age, because the world's starting to get too crazy. I mean, it seems like we've got, shootings every other day. And I'm not blaming the gun. I've got one right here. Never shot anybody. I shot a target, but it's sitting right there. Probably got a round in it because I don't play around with home defense. If you're coming into my house, you better be damn ready to take a bullet. In Minecraft. But you don't use tools unless you have a reason to use tools. And if you use those tools, you have a responsibility to use them properly. Because if you don't, something bad's gonna happen. If you're using a saw the wrong way, you're either gonna slip and cut yourself, or you're gonna break the saw. You either break the tool that you use, or you hurt yourself. So, don't weaponize something that you don't need to weaponize. Because eventually, when you pull that trigger, or when you swing that hammer, or when you use that knife, it'll break. But anyway, guys, until next time, you stay frosty.